What's going on, guys? My name is JetXC, and I hope you guys can take the time, relax for a bit, because we're going to really dive into Act 1 of Wuthering Waves. I don't want to get too deep into it because I don't think it's really worth it to get too deep. I think the biggest thing with Act 1 is understanding what all these terms mean and what's going on within Wuthering Waves, right? Act 1 through 6, overall, I would say it's good, right? It's interesting to say the least. 5 and 6 has been deemed probably the best parts of wuwa, and I could agree with that. Now, 1 to 2 is a little rough. 3 to 4 picks up, but 1 to 2, you don't know what the heck's going on. Yang Yang is yapping about a bunch of things. You don't know what the hell she's talking about. She's talking about Threnodians, tacit fields, tacit discords, fractious. What does all of this shit mean? Let's relax and let's take things bit by bit here. Normally, I don't pay attention to gacha stories. So I said, you know what? Let's try and dive into wuwa. I've been enjoying it for the past week. I can't put it down. So I said, let's go back in the story and talk about Act 1 with my viewers. So guys, sit back and relax and let's talk about Wuthering Waves Act 1. Now, we start out with God Waifu. Now we're in this mystical universe and it looks pretty. It looks very beautiful. God Waifu slowly rolls up to Rover. Rover is unconscious during this whole thing. She gets close to Rover. There's something shiny in her hand. Takes it, pushes it inside of Rover's body, and then slowly takes her arms and brushes all the way down to her hands. And from there, puts a tacit mark on Rover. After that, she seems a little bit sad, but she didn't stop what she was doing. Pushes Rover down. And as she pushes Rover down, Rover slowly starts to wake up. We see God Waifu smile. Now, if you look closely, we see Rover falling into this weird universe, and you see all these lines and squigglies within this thing that she's being thrown into. And just to give a brief observation, as we go along within Acts 1 through 6, you can assume that what she's being thrown into are sounds and frequencies. And this is very important for the world of Wuthering Waves because reverberations, frequencies, sounds, a bunch of different terms, whatever you want to call it, is very important in this world, and we'll get into that very soon. So, you see her falling. She continues to fall, and then it looks like she's in some water. She's trying to swim up ashore of this water so she doesn't drown. And then she finally pokes her head out and she looks at the sunset. But then you notice it's flipped upside down and she's upside down. And the world is actually under her as she looks upside down, right? And this is how we start Wuthering Waves. Very interesting and a little bit weird. So afterwards, I don't know how much time has passed, but Rover wakes up in the Gorge of Spirits, right? And you can look at this on the map and find where she wakes up. So it's right outside of Jinzhou, which Jinzhou is the city, a city within the region of Huanglong, right? So keep that in mind. Now we wake up, we see our two main girls. We see Chisha, who was about to perform CPR on us if we didn't wake up, and we see Yang Yang, who's very worried. Now, Yang Yang asks, hey, are you okay? Is everything good? And you just look with the blank stare, right? Rover looks with the blank stare. And she asks us, do you know what your name is? Do you know who you are? Do you know anything? We don't know shit. We don't know what the hell is going on. And Chisha mentions that, well, Baija said that there wouldn't be any after effects. So apparently, based off that, somebody knew that we would be here. But we do have some after effects. We don't remember anything. We don't know who we are. So because of that, Yang Yang notices, you know what? Because of the way you look, can we call you Rover? Which is, you know, essentially just saying someone that roams around. We're going to call her Rover. Cool. Great. Now, as they're yapping back and forth, Yang Yang looks up. She feels this wind. She feels something very suspicious. And that's where the story starts. Now, after feeling this, she says, I can sense the etherical seas. And from the etherical seas, a tacit field is forming. Full stop. What the hell are you talking about? What's the Etherical Sea? What's the Tacit Discord? Now, the Etherical Seas is interesting. There's probably can be a couple of interpretations of what it may be, but the best way I could describe to you the Etherical Seas is essentially it's an otherworldly ocean that coexists in another world within Wuthering Waves, or the region of Wonglong, right? So it's this other world that coexists with your world, and Yang Yang has the power to sense this Etherical Sea and its movements. And its movements is letting her know that a tacit field is forming. Now, what's a tacit field? Well, a tacit field, if you look at it, has a tacit mark. So essentially, it's a tacit mark on a piece of land, right? And that tacit mark will spawn in random places within the world of Wuthering Waves. And through that tacit mark, TDs spawn. What's a TD? Tacit Discord. TDs are essentially the monsters. Right, let's not make it too complicated. These are essentially the monsters that are forming from this other world into our world in Wuthering Waves. So the Etherical Sea is linked to tacit marks, which is linked to tacit discords. So this other world is bringing in these monsters, and all of these things are connected, right? So Yang Yang's a bit scared, so they want to give a move on. They want to get a move on to meet Baija. So, as we're about to leave, Rover gets this vision. And it's this vision of this giant dragon. And Rover's a bit stunned. Yang Yang notices that she's stunned. She asks, what's wrong? And we tell her what's going on. We tell her that we saw this vision of a dragon. Yang Yang explains that, oh, you must have seen Jue. And I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Jue, I think that's how you pronounce it. But Jue is a sentinel. And essentially, this dragon is the guardian of the city of Jinzhou. Now, Jinzhou is a city within a region called Huanglong. There are 6 other areas within Huanglong. Again, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And within those other areas, there are other sentinels, right? So there are 6 cities, and that's including Jinzhou. And Jinzhou has the guardian sentinel dragon. And with the other areas, we don't know those other areas. Hey, future content, we'll see. But I'm guessing it'll be like a monkey. The other one will be like a lion or something like that. It'll be some crazy shit like that. But just know that Jue is the guardian sentinel of Jinzhou. It's like this guardian spirit. He protects and I guess watches over the city. Right? So that's who we saw as Rover. Now, Yang gets surprised by this because typically, only appointed resonators, she mentions, can only see Jue. But Jue appeared in front of Rover. And the only other person that we know, or at least Yang Yang mentions, is Jin Shi, which is the magistrate of Jinzhou. Essentially, the mayor, right? If you want to look at it that way. She's the mayor. She runs things in the city, right? So Yang Yang is surprised by that fact. And we kind of leave it at that, right? That's something we got to keep in mind there. Now, we've slowly learned a bunch of things already, right? Within the first like 5-10 minutes of the game. And now we start to run out into the world of Wuthering Waves. Now, there's a few things that are pointed out as you're moving to get to Baija. The first thing is that there's something called a Residence Nexus. Now, within the game of Wuthering Waves, the Residence Nexus is some place that you spawn in. When you go to your map, it heals you when you spawn on it, and it also reveals a bigger parts of the world of Wuthering Waves and Jinzhou, right? But they mention that the Residence Nexus provides coverage protection for Jinzhou, and it's in the form of a force field. Later in Act 5 and 6, you kind of get to know a little bit more of what this force field is, but just keep that little tidbit in mind. So that's why Resident Nexus is important in this world, right? And it also gives signal of communications as well. As we're running, we make it to the top of this mountain, right? And we see, looking down, we see Baija in this tacit field. And the gang is a little bit worried because why is Baija near this tacit field? It could be dangerous. But Yang Yang explains that there's something interesting with tacit fields. And this could be very confusing for a lot of people, including myself. I was like, wait, what the heck are you talking about? But I had to really run it down and slow it down for myself. So I'll kind of break it down for you guys. A new formed tacit field goes through a dormant period. Now, key phrase, newly formed tacit fields go through dormant period. Newly formed. So the faster it forms, the longer the dormant period. Now, what does that mean? Let's say it takes a day for a tacit field to form. Let's just say that's really fast. Oh, wow, it formed in a day? That means it'll take a whole entire 2 weeks for it to activate. Now, let's say another tacit field forms in 2 days. That means in another 3 days, it'll activate. So the quicker the tacit field is fully formed, which I'm assuming is the entire tacit mark forming, the quicker that whole thing is made on land, then the longer it'll activate. So essentially, if it formed within the day, you really don't have to worry about it. If it took multiple days for it to form, then you have to be careful because something could pop out, which essentially would be the tacit discord. So Baija is actually safe in this moment because it appeared in the game like immediately, like maybe 5-10 minutes, because we're running to get to Baija because we sensed the tacit field while we were talking to Yang Yang when we woke up. So Baija's safe. So we decide to join her. Now, we walk down, we get there, Baija's looking sexy as hell. She does the walk and you're just mesmerized. So you're kind of taken out of it. Like, yo, hang on, pay attention, right? Now, Baija looks at you up and down. She makes sure you're okay and you're good to go, right? You're like, yeah, I'm good. Don't worry, Baija. We're good. Then afterwards, something starts to form. Suddenly, out of nowhere, this ray of light starts to form, and then you hear something going on. Something is vibrating and it's hurting all the resonators, right? And then you, as Rover, you turn around and boom, there's this tacit discord in your face. And it's Crownless, right? The very first TD that we meet, Crownless. And he looks pretty menacing. Now, what happens is Crownless uses his ability to form a force field around him to block out Baija and Shisha. So it's you and Yang Yang against Crownless. You don't know what the hell's going on. So you box Crownless, you 1v1 him, you mess him up a little bit, you're learning how to dodge, you're learning how to lock on, you're learning the basics of Wuthering Waves. Yang Yang helps you out a little bit, but you manage to defeat him. Now, as you defeat him, he disintegrates and turns into this orange trophy looking thing. Now, of course, we all know what that is. He turns himself, well, he doesn't turn himself, but he gets defeated and he's turned into an echo. Now, before all this happens, Yang Yang mentions how, wow, Rover, you're really powerful. You're really something, and you're just like, whatever. You helped me out. Technically, she didn't really help out. It was all you, right? So she's giving you praise, and then she goes on to explain, oh, by the way, do you know what reverberations are and echoes are? Of course not. We just got done trying to figure out what the hell you've been talking about since the beginning of the game, Yang Yang. So you ask her, please tell me what reverberations are and echoes are. So this is her explanation, right? And I kind of summarize it, but reverberations, and this goes into the beginning of the game, so pay attention. Reverberations are everything in the world that is made up of frequencies, and any sound generates a reverberation. Echoes are lingering reverberations of tacit discords after they are disintegrated. You can absorb these reverberations in your terminal or your gourd. Now, what the hell is she talking about? Again, a lot of this stuff is like, what? But when you start to get the terminology, it starts to make a little bit of sense. So essentially what she's saying is this world of Wuthering Waves is made up of frequencies and sounds. Now, if you remember when Rover was being pushed into that etherical sea, yes, the etherical sea, when Rover pops her head out, that was the perfect example of what the etherical sea looks like. So she starts to get pushed into these squiggly little lines and waves that you see within the animation at the beginning of the game. Those are the frequencies of the world, and she lands herself within the etherical sea. So all this stuff is connected. So again, the world is made up of vibrations and sounds, and an echo, like she said, is just a lingering reverberation. So after you defeat a tacit discord, they leave behind their reverberations, and you're able to absorb them with your gourd that every resonator has, which is also known as your terminal. So gourd, terminal, doesn't matter. But that is what Rover can do as a resonator, and that's what any resonator can do. They absorb things with their gourd and collect different types of tacit discord known as echo, and collect that data in their data bank, which, I mean, if you played the game, you know what all that is, right? So pretty cool, pretty interesting. We've learned a little bit more now of the world. Anything else you want to tell us, Yang Yang? And apparently there's nothing else. So after Yang Yang's typical yap session, we start to leave, and as we're leaving, right, there's this force field that's kind of pulling Rover in, and our entire arm is being pulled in, and your tacit mark starts to activate. So the strong force is pulling you in, you know it's crownless. And then Rover just acts on her own and turns around, takes her arm, and you see her pull out her arm that has the tacit mark, and she begins to absorb the tacit discord. Now, this is very interesting and very surprising. Chisha starts to go crazy, like, whoa, have you been hiding this from us the whole time? What's going on? What's going on? This is significant because the fact that Rover can absorb a tacit discord with her bare hands is something that no other resonator can do. And then Baija mentions, well, you know, there was this very significant person in history that could do such a thing, right? And so Baija and Chisha, between the two of them, they kind of talk about who this famous person was, and I'm just gonna go into it on what they said, right? Baija mentions there was a person in history who was a celestial being commanding the universe. Assuming mortal form, they condensed the primordial essence, creating Pangu. What the hell are they yapping about? What is Pangu? Right? So I said, you know what, let me do a little bit of digging. So Pangu within Chinese lore is this primordial being in Taoism, right? In the religion of Taoism that separated heaven and earth. And essentially they were the progenitor of life, and they were a god of gods. Like, they created life and they created other gods, right? So that's just a brief summary of what the hell Pangu is. And I don't think it ever comes up in the story ever again, but they're essentially comparing Rover to a god, right? This person in the story, or in this history, right, this person also was able to absorb the first tacit discord, or the first echo. And this first tacit discord was the most powerful tacit discord ever. And after they absorbed it as an echo, they used that echo to create the world and Huanglong, right? So this person, with defeating this being of a tacit discord, however powerful it was, used that tacit discord's power, or I guess their power, along with the TD, to create the world that we know as Huanglong, the region of Huanglong. And that's kind of the brief history lesson that they give us. And essentially they're, it's very obvious, guys. They're hinting that Rover is that person, or at least relates to that person, right? So very interesting stuff here. Now, small little side theory here, but I believe that Rover may have been given this power by God Waifu, and she might be related to Rover, or she might be Rover may be a descendant of her. We just don't know. But we know that Rover has the powers of essentially the god of this verse, right? So very interesting stuff. And, as we go along into the other acts, we know in Act 6 that we see the mini animal come out of Rover, and we can assume that that animal or creature that was given to us by the God Waifu. God Waifu gave us this little being that we had no idea that was inside of us. So, little theory crafting by me, you can maybe surmise that what she put inside of Rover was not only just the tacit mark, but this TD, which it could be a TD, we don't know. Again, I'm theory crafting. That monster, that very powerful being, could be this little cute creature that we see right in front of us on Act 6. But hey, we're gonna get there some other time. I'll see you guys in Act 6. Wow. a couple videos from now. But anyway. So after hearing all that, we get a communication. And this communication is from Jinshi, who is the magistrate of Jinzhou. She talks about how the people of Jinzhou are a proud people, and we have a lot of resonators protecting the land of Jinzhou, and that is their duty, and she will uphold that duty to the best of her abilities, right? And she mentions also with this festival, which she mentions there's a festival ongoing, she's actually waiting for a very special visitor that is very important to Jinzhou and all of Huanglong region, and that is obviously Rover. So she also mentions that she's been waiting for Rover for a long time, and she knows that Rover is going through things that they may not understand, but she will try her best to help answer those questions. So the gang, Baija, Chisha, Yang Yang, all assume it's Rover, and it is Rover, right? So they quickly talk about how Jinshi is the magistrate of Jinzhou. She was selected by Jue the Sentinel. Her real name is Shi, Hsi. I think that's how you pronounce that. And when you become the magistrate, you take on the city's surname. So that's why she's Jinshi, I guess, right? Because she's the magistrate of Jinzhou. I guess that's how that works. Now, after that's explained, we slowly make our way to the front of Jinzhou, and that ends Act 1. Now, at the end of Act 1, we see that we're being followed, right? And there's some lady in white and red that's following us that we know as Camellia, but we'll get into that later on around Act 5. But we've been followed since the beginning of this game, and that ends Act 1. We learned quite a bit. We learned about Jinshi, we learned about Jinzhou, we learned about Jue the Sentinel, and how there are other Sentinels out there within the region of Huanglong. We learned about tacit fields spawning tacit discords, and how newly formed tacit fields, the quicker they form, the longer they stay dormant. We learned about etherical sea, and this etherical sea is this mystical, otherworldly ocean, right? And it coexists within the world of Wuthering Waves, right? We learned about the etherical sea. We learned about Yang Yang and Chisha a little bit, Baija. We learned about Rover, and Rover being this important person in the past, and how Rover relates to a lot of the history, possibly, of the story of Wuthering Waves and Huanglong. So there's a lot of stuff we cover. So again, I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know if you've got any questions or comments. Again, I really don't pay attention to stories within gacha games that much, but I said, you know what, let's give this a try. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Follow me, subscribe, JetXC guys, and I'll see you guys for the video in Act 2. Later.